We're going to start by doing the final exam review for pre-calculus, and for video 1, we're going to be doing questions 1 through 11. Okay, so starting with number 1, we have two equations. We're going to find the points of intersection. So first thing I'm going to do is graph these on my calculator. I've got x to the third minus 3 for y1. And then 5 minus 2x for y2. I'm going to hit graph. And once this graphs these two lines, I'm just going to draw a sketch on my paper too. So I've got line 1, line 2, they cross right here. I'm going to find the point of intersection. So to do that, we're going to go to second trace, intersect, which is number 5. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. And it's going to say first curve, so just hit enter. Second curve, it should automatically bump you to the second line. Press enter, and then guess, just move your cursor close to where they cross. And we're going to get a decimal, so we're going to round to 3 places. So that's 1.670, 1.659, but that rounds to 660. Question number 2 says find the domain. So same thing, I'm going to graph this on my calculator. Just be careful, use your fraction bar. So we're going to do alpha y equals. First one is the fraction. I'm going to do x minus 1 on top, x plus 2 on the bottom, and hit graph. Okay, so I'm going to draw a sketch. I've got a line here and a line here. So what it looks like is I have an asymptote. Now remember, when you have a fraction, you can't have the denominator equal 0. So what number would make the denominator equal to 0? Well, it would be -2. So we have an asymptote here at -2. So the domain is everywhere except -2. So we could write that as all real numbers not equal to -2. Or we could write it in interval notation. So that means -infinity to -2 and -2 to infinity. So either one of these is the correct way to write this. Okay, let's go to number 3. Use a graphing utility to approximate to 2 decimal places. That should say 3, not 2. So we always do 3 decimal places. Any relative min or relative max of the function x squared minus x plus 1. So I'm going to graph that, x squared minus x plus 1. And this is a parabola. Which would have a minimum. So I'm going to calculate the minimum on my calculator. I'm going to go second trace. Number 3 is a minimum. We're going to go left, right, take a guess. So that's 0.5, 0.75. I'm going to label that min at 0.5, 0.75. Okay, let's go to number 4. Describe the sequence of transformations from the parent function. Well, hopefully you recognize that the parent function would be the square root of x. That's the graph that looks like this. Now, the other thing we want to notice are all these little numbers here and what they're doing to the graph. If you have a negative out in front, that is an x-axis reflection. Now, if the negative were on the inside with the x, that would be a y-axis reflection. Now, we have a plus 2 on the inside. That means our graph is moving to the left 2. And then on the outside, we have a plus 5. That means our graph is moving up 5. On to question number 5. Find the inverse. Okay, so whoops, nope. Number 5, I was skipping to number 6. Number 5, we have f of x, g of x, and h of x. We're going to find f of h of -2. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by finding the inside part. So I'm going to find h of -2. And I'm going to do that by plugging it into my h formula. So this will give me 4 times 2, which is 8, minus 8. That gives me 0. So now that I have that, I'm going to find the outside, but I'm going to plug 0 into that. So now I'm going to find f of 0. -2 times 0 is 0. Number 6, we're going to find the inverse. So inverse means we're going to do everything opposite. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch x and y, and we're going to solve for y. So to do that, I'm going to add 6 to both sides. Then I'm going to divide by 2. Then I'm going to take a square root, and when I take a square root, I need a plus or minus out in front. Now, one thing we want to remember, though, is we want to write this as an inverse. So that little symbol, the -1, f inverse of x equals plus or minus the square root of x plus 6 over 2. Okay, now we're going to do some logarithmic equations, solving these. So let's do number 7. So remember, the opposite of a log is an exponent. So if I want to get rid of a log with a base 7, I'm going to use an exponent with a base of 7. So these would cancel. I'm left with x equals 7 to the 4th. So I'm going to use my calculator to do that. So I'm going to go to my main screen, and I'm going to type in 7 to the 4th power. Gives me 2,401. Number 8. Number 8 and 9 are going to be our expanding and condensing problems. So I'm going to write the formulas over here on the right. So one property, the log of m times n, we can split that up into the log of m plus the log of n. If you have division, we split that up using subtraction. And then if you have an exponent, we can move that out in front. So let's try expanding this first one, number 8. So I have multiplication on top, and I have division. So let's start with the top part here. Now this x has an exponent of 5, so that's going to be 5 log base 4 of x. Plus, since it's being multiplied by the y, 3 log base 4 of y. And now since we're dividing, we're going to subtract, and there's no exponent with the z, so it's just log base 4 of z. Now with number 9, we're going to go backwards. So when we go backwards, we're just going to put one ln out in front. So no more ln's, we're done with that. We're going to work from left to right here. So I have an exponent of 5 that goes with this x minus 2. So I'm going to write that, x minus 2 to the 5th power. Minus, that means I'm going to divide by this x plus 2. Now this, so we have another minus, that means we're going to keep dividing, or I can just put it on the denominator with this x plus 2, and I'll show you why in a minute here. X to the 3rd. So let me explain why. If I wrote this a different way, if you got a little confused by that, we have the ln of x minus 2 to the 5th over x plus 2, and if I did another divided by x to the 3rd, we kind of have a fraction and a fraction situation here. So we would basically be simplifying this problem to get it to equal this one over here. Another way you can think about this, let me write it like this as well. So down here I'm going to write this. We can also write this by factoring out this negative. So here you can see that it's ln of x minus 2 minus, and this is now a quantity being added, which means that they're multiplied in the denominator. So that's another way you can look at that and see why both of these are just in the denominator. Okay, moving on to number 10. Here we're going to solve for x. So first thing I want to do is get this e by itself. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. Then I'm going to divide by 2. And now I'm going to get rid of the e. So to get rid of the e, I'm going to do the opposite of e. The opposite of e, hopefully you remember this, is ln. I'm going to grab my calculator for this one. So now I'm left with just the x minus 3, but I'm going to find the ln of 2.5. So ln is right by the 4 down here, right here, by the 4. Type in 2.5, we get a decimal, 0.916. Now the last thing I'm going to do though is add the 3 over. So that is 3.916. Okay, last one for part 1, we have the ln of 5x equals 7.2. So just like with the last problem, if we want to get rid of ln, we're going to use e. So I'm going to do e to both sides. That leaves me with 5x on the left and e to the 7.2. So I'm going to find e to the 7.2 on my calculator. To get to e, it's second ln. So second ln, which again is right by the 4. And you're going to type in 7.2. So I get a pretty big number, 1339. But last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to leave that decimal right in my calculator. I have to divide that by 5. So divide by 5, and we get 267.886. Okay, so that concludes part 1 of your final exam review.